I'm at the DFrag conference outside of Denver, Colorado today, and one of the key things that the DFrag conference looks at is the overall cloud system space, IoT, serverless microservices, and really focuses in on API-enabled and driven services and components. Really the things that you can automate or the things that enable automation, middleware services. This is all a large part of what DFrag really talks about. And one of the topics that we really haven't talked about before, either on 5 Minutes of Cloud or in the blogs, is this concept of serverless computing. I think a couple of months back I wrote a response to a Twitter stream about serverless saying, well, I mean, serverless is kind of a misnomer because you're still going to have a server. But I think that kind of misses the mark, and it was probably a little too jesty or too much in jest. Didn't really define what I was trying to get across, which is that it's yet another way of thinking about the compute construct. But I think one of the subtle things that maybe even I missed at the time was the concept that serverless changes how you actually approach your applications. When you have a server, when you have a process that's always expected to be running, you think about things differently than if you have processes that exist only for a brief moment in time. And that's really the mental shift that serverless creates. It's another one of the new application development and deployment technologies that people are looking at. And in a sense, it borrows a lot of the concepts from containers. People also talk about unikernels in terms of serverless, where unikernels are another component of this environment. But all of these pieces put together mean that you have a different way of thinking about applications. So rather than saying, okay, I have my application, I deploy it, and it starts running on a server-style construct, and this is true for bare metal deployments, for virtual machine deployments, for container-based deployments, that process now expects to continue to run. You would only stop it running and change it if you were changing the application. Well, the serverless world thinks about things a little bit differently. Rather than assuming that the application will always be running, I'm only going to run the application when it needs to do something. Maybe it needs to process and create a user interface for an end user. So it needs to create the data that gets passed across a web session via an API, usually a RESTful API. I'm going to pass you some data, and maybe it's customized even to you, your avatar and your background and a bunch of other components that are specific to you. But once that transaction is done, there's really nothing that the server needs to do anymore. It's done its job. That particular transaction is complete. So that server process that created that can disappear. You wouldn't know. You wouldn't really even care. You make another transaction request, and now the system again wants to take that new request and apply it to something. So it'll spin up the right back-end process to actually execute that. And it's that back-end process component that is the serverless component. Now there is often some form of either long-running or rapidly deployable service that enables the API. I have to have some way of actually talking to these serverless components. And that's really the only thing that's maybe long-running in these environments. Well, that's not really true because we also have our back-end databases. So there are many pieces that may still be long-running, but the application code itself only exists when it's actually trying to implement something, when it's trying to actually execute something, create some new data structure and provide that to the end user, receive some data from the end user and store it in some location for persistence somewhere else. And that really is the crux of serverless. I think this is going to be a huge technology going forward because it really can be game-changing. Just the simplest possible example, if I can spin up my application component only when I need to, if I want to upgrade it or try a new version of that, every time somebody connects to my service, I can try a new component. And if it doesn't work, I can rapidly roll back to the previous component with very little impact to the overall system. This is really game-changing, and it's going to be an important component of all server-based, application-based discussions, I think, in the foreseeable future, and it's going to grow and scale, I think, pretty dramatically. This has been Robert Starmer with Kumulus Technologies. We bring you how cloud can actually enable your business and service. My name is Robert Starmer, and we bring you how cloud works for you.